We know that SPM Intelligence itself did carry out a number of research efforts before and during the election. In fact, you expected to see some of the highest turnout numbers this year. Now, INEC says that turnout was lower than 2019. If you compare the research that you did to INEC's numbers, what are the similarities and differences?
Thank you very much for having me. I think the data points that informed our call that there would be high voter turnout, based on the research that we did, and based on even INEC's published numbers around the interest in registering to vote, over 10 million new voters registered this time for these elections, and many of them young people. In addition to that, out of the 93 million-ish people that registered to vote, over 90% of them picked up their PVCs. The highest PVCs are permanent voter cards that enable you vote in Nigeria. The highest percentage that we've had ever. That was indicative of people that had intentions to vote. When we asked people how certain they were going to vote in the surveys that we conducted before the elections, the majority of the people were either very certain or very likely to vote. That was indicative of high interest, high ability, as well as, even just having the capability by having the PVCs. If you look at the campaigning and the online chatter and offline chatter as well about the elections, it was clear that interest in voting in these elections were high. If you look at the election day and the kind of chatter that went on online and offline as well about people turning up to vote and going, you know that there was a high turnout for these elections. What then influenced the official low turnout numbers? The first, I think, is a case where people turned up to vote, but there were logistical challenges that prevented them from voting. For example, the INEC officials did not turn up on time, and in some polling units that we monitored, less than half of the people that turned up to vote ended up voting. In some places, violence also occurred that stopped people from being able to vote. And then in many places, across the country, there were results called for places that there were allegations that voting didn't occur. So you have this mix of the logistical issues that INEC created by how they turned out, plus, the inability of people to vote because some of the INEC things did not work. So the low voter turnout from this rests squarely on INEC and not on Nigerians, because people wanted to and people tried to vote.
And I'd like to get your thoughts on the final tally of that vote, because you've been following it quite closely, and you actually said that voters definitely have a reason to ask questions, especially posed at the Electoral Commission. Why do you believe that when it comes to the final tally?
If you've been following the chatter, you'll see that a lot of voters now, INEC made some promises before the elections with regards to two innovations that they brought in during these elections: the BVAS, which is the machine that accreditation happened on, and which was also the machine that should upload the results electronically, and a portal called the IREV portal, where results will be uploaded to and will be open and available for the public to view on a polling unit by polling unit basis. In the case of this election, both innovations did not perform up to the level or in the manner that INEC had advertised and sensitized people that they will perform. These were some of the two things that encouraged people to believe that their votes would count, that the vote would be transparent, and that whoever their votes elected will be announced. Now, when these two items didn't perform to optimal levels, INEC was silent for the most part, and even up till now has not addressed these issues properly. When people then began to check the IREV portal, people were able to show in many cases where there was a difference between what their votes were and what was uploaded to the portal. In some cases, results were not uploaded to the portal for days after the elections. And these results should have been uploaded immediately the results were announced at the polling unit. All of these raise questions, big questions around, how the results were come by. The reason these innovations were brought up was so that people will be able to follow the results as they are being announced and validate them. Those are the key issues that INEC needs to address, that INEC needs to talk about, that INEC needs to convince people that they should trust the results that they've announced.
And indeed, Tunde, we're not hearing this for the first time. Of course, a number of election observers have come out and said the same thing. But in light of these logistical and operational challenges, do you think that opposition parties have a legitimate case against INEC and this vote? Do you see them succeeding with that challenge?
Just today, the candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi, announced that he will be challenging these results in court. Let me just say that in Nigeria, every election, especially at presidential level, gets challenged in court, all the ones that I've held before. But it is clear that in this case, there are grounds for such challenges. It remains to be seen if the data gathering and the evidence gathering that has been done by the opposition parties will support these challenges in a way that they are admissible and can change the course of things in court. But do we think there are grounds? We think absolutely that there are grounds, and we think it is the right approach for the opposition parties to take to go to court and challenge the elections in court and see what the courts will say to the results of the elections when they challenge them, presenting evidence that is gathered in a meticulous and methodical manner. That is really the crux of the matter. Will they be able to gather the evidence and present it in a way that the courts will be able to reconsider and make a decision? That remains to be seen.
Well, Tunde, before we let you go, I'd like to get your insights into what Nigeria would look like under Tinubu's administration. Now, of course, he is inheriting an economy which is in a crisis, a country that's also struggling with widespread insecurity right now. Now, his election manifesto pretty much pledged to end subsidies, which a lot of previous leaders have pledged to do. He said he'll channel these funds to critical areas in the economy. What are the people expecting from Tinubu based on his promises? How do investors feel right now?
We think, and it looks like, excuse me, the Tinubu presidency from the beginning will struggle with a legitimacy problem. And legitimacy problem in terms of only 30-something% of Nigerians actually voted to get him in. And there is a huge challenge and a huge cloud that hangs over his emergence as president. Now, when you want to make radical changes like removing subsidy, which will get reactions from the people because it will take money out of their pockets, removing, changing the FX regime, foreign exchange regime, which is one of the things that were promised as well, and fixing the issues in the oil and gas sector, which are like the 3 big 10 poles that are needed, and finally raising revenue. Those 4 things are things that will have direct impact on the lives of people. You need a lot of legitimacy. You need a lot of support, broad-based support from the people to be willing to accept whatever hardships come on the basis of those decisions. We're not sure that that kind of broad-based legitimacy exists yet. And until that happens, it will be very hard for him to make those kinds of decisions and back them up politically. You remember that this subsidy issue was essentially what led to the Nigerians turning against the Goodluck Jonathan administration very early on in that administration. It is also very possible that if it is not handled correctly, it may lead to that kind of situation with the Tinubu administration. Having said that, there are a couple of things that Tinubu is well known for and known to do very well. Raising revenue, government revenues is one of them, and this is one of the things that Nigeria needs desperately at the moment. In addition, Tinubu also is known for raising debt, a significant amount of debt. Now, Nigeria has a fiscal challenge with his debt servicing to revenue ratios. So while Tinubu's approach usually is to raise debt, it remains to be seen if he will be able to raise debt and how he intends to accommodate this fiscally. But we expect to see a lot of debt. So people that are interested in bonds and those kind of things should look at Nigeria in this period. There will be more of that issuance coming out of Nigeria in that period.